Oh. Okay.
And then I'll let everyone
Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Zoom demo. Today we're joined with Vic, which we're really excited about. So just a couple things before the demo actually begins. If you guys have any questions, please type them into the chat box. It just avoids any confusion and distraction on Vic's end or anyone else paying attention to the demo. And then either myself or Annie will read them out to Vic whenever she gets a moment and hopefully get all those answers for you guys. And then if anything is missed, we are going to have a Q&A at the very end, and that should clear up any questions. With that being said, I'll let Vic take it away and introduce yourself, and then we can get started with the demo.
Hey everybody. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Vic, and I'm here on behalf of Royal Talens. So thanks so much Above Ground for having us today. We're going to be talking about some of my favorite products, actually, the Ecoline Brushpen markers. But before I just jump right into the demo, I actually put together just a little presentation for you guys. It's pretty short, but I'm going to go ahead and just go over that first, and then we'll get right into the actual demo. So if you have any questions about anything, please feel free to go ahead and ask in the chat, and the lovely ladies at Above Ground will let me know. We'll go ahead and get all of your questions answered. So, okay, can everybody see my screen okay? Does it look good, girls?
Yeah, it looks great.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so we're going to be talking about the Ecoline markers today. And we will be demoing that little bug that was on the left-hand side. But just really quickly, a brief introduction about the company that makes the Ecoline markers. So they were established in the late 1800s, and that was in the Netherlands. However, Royal Talens opened up a branch in North America about 6 years ago. They're best known for many brands, but mainly Rembrandt, Amsterdam, Van Gogh, and Ecoline. We make a huge variety of products, though. And of course, last but not least, they have an art ambassador program, which leads me to myself. So, hey, everybody, it's me. Basically, I've been an art ambassador for Royal Talens for about 6 years now. And I get the honor of demoing their art supplies at different places. But besides that, I am a full-time artist. I have my own comic book series and Etsy store. But most importantly, I really love to use a variety of different art supplies. So I have a lot of experience using these art supplies together and separately, and I'm really excited to share that with you. As you can see from my artwork on the right-hand side, I am all about color and making my art super vibrant, which is perfect for the Ecoline markers. So the Ecoline markers come in two different forms. They also come in a liquid jar form. The main attribute of Ecoline is that it is very water soluble and it has highly saturated colors. So the reason that it's so highly saturated and vibrant is because it's dye-based, which means that it's not light fast. There's 60 colors available in both the markers and the jars. Out of all of these 60 colors, almost all of them are transparent, except for, I believe, 2 of them, which are more opaque. It's a white and a gold. And of course, these are sold individually or in sets. I also wanted to just kind of do like a quick compare and contrast between the markers and the jars. The markers have this really fabulous felt brush nib on it. It's very durable and it comes to a really nice point. So you can get a lot of really small, tight detail out of the markers. As opposed to the jars, which are going to be a very fluid formula, which is going to be really great for doing larger, looser illustrations. Just one more thing about the jars is they have these really nice kind of squeezer tops on them, which feature a glass pipette on the bottom. So it's kind of like a really fancy eyedropper tool. Okay, so I'm sure that most of you are familiar with how a standard watercolor works. That's basically going to be how these markers are going to react. So basically, they're going to be a watercolor marker. It can be diluted with water, so you can use the marker to its fullest vibrancy, or you can use a little bit of water to kind of dilute it down and make it a little bit more subtle. With that being said, these are also water soluble, which means that once you're finished with an illustration, you can always go back in once it's dry with a wet brush or the markers again and work back into it. Of course, these can also be used in conjunction with other wet mediums, and that is because of their gum arabic binder. So these are going to work seamlessly with other watercolors you may have at home, watercolor pencils. You can use gouache, all sorts of different wet mediums. While I demo, I always get a lot of questions about the brushes that I use, so I just wanted to kind of quickly go over that as well. I'm going to be using some Neptune brushes for this demo. They're made to be kind of like a very soft, thirsty brush, and although they are very soft, they do keep their shape really well. They were created to kind of mimic a squirrel hair, so if you guys are familiar with those, this is going to be a synthetic version of that, and they're made by Princeton. They have a whole bunch of different shapes. I particularly like their liner that they have. Okay. I'm also going to be using some jelly rolls towards the end of the demo just to add some highlights. These pair wonderfully with the Ecoline markers. So these are made by Sakura. They're a gel-based ink. So they're going to glide right on top of those markers with no problem. They are water soluble, so we're going to be using a little bit of water to kind of blend them into our markers. And most importantly, they're opaque, which means that they're going to be perfect for our highlights. Okay, guys, last but not least, I promised that this was a short little introduction here. I just wanted to kind of talk about the paper that we're going to be using. It's going to be a Van Gogh watercolor paper. So this paper is 100% cellulose, so it's not cotton, but it is acid-free, 140 pounds, which pretty much means it's your standard watercolor paper, and it has a fine grain kind of texture on it. Okay, so without further ado, I'm gonna go ahead and switch on over to my other camera, and then we can go ahead and get started. Okay.
So we actually just had a quick question already.
Okay.
How should we store the markers? So how do you store them for the best result?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for the majority of your pens and your markers, you want to actually store them horizontally. And then that way the ink isn't going to settle in the very bottom of the marker or the top. So store them sideways.
That's great. That's great to know for us as well. And will any cold press paper do? Will it damage the pen tip?
Well, you can't go on EI if you choose to leave it off. Yeah.
All right, awesome. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep. So we actually just have one last question. Oh,
Yeah, of
we have a
course.
couple coming in already.
No worries.
Will cold press paper damage the pen tip?
Oh, that's a great question. Not at all. These brush nibs are very, very durable. You can really kind of scrub with them and not have any problems. Let me hold one up so you guys can see it. Comes to a really nice point. And before I begin actually just painting the beetle that we're going to do today, I did want to show you guys just how nicely these markers blend on kind of a larger scale, just so you can see it a little bit bigger. But basically, this brush tip, you can get some really fine strokes, you can get some larger strokes. However, you can, after you lay down your initial marks with your marker, you can just take a wet brush, so just water, and just kind of saturate one side of the strokes you've put down, and you can get some really beautiful watercolor blends out of that. But there's multiple ways that you can use and blend these markers. You can just use two or multiple markers to kind of blend into each other, make some really beautiful fades that way. And if you're worried about your tip, like, you know, I kind of dipped this right into my green marker these tips actually have a way of kind of working themselves back to regular. So even though I touched it right into the green, it goes back to normal. And the felt tip on them are, like I said, really resilient, but they also have a nice kind of like snap to them. They don't really, it doesn't lean one way after you press down with it hard, if that makes sense. Okay. All right, guys. So I'm going to go ahead and start on my little beetle here. And if we have any questions as we go, please feel free to ask away. So I'm going to start my illustration with a lighter mid-tone. One of my favorite things to do when I'm drawing a subject like this is to pick the color that's mostly throughout the entire image. So basically what I'm going to do is just look at my reference photo and start plugging in any areas where this green may be. And the thing is you don't have to worry about maybe missing a spot because you can always come back into it later. And as you can see, the marker, because it has such like a nice point on it, allows you to be really deliberate with your brush strokes. But you don't have to be very precise with them at this point, because the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to take a wet brush and kind of agitate the edges of what I've put down. The shell is going to be really chromatic, so it doesn't have to have all these sharp edges on it. So here's my initial kind of first base, and then I'll take that Neptune watercolor brush. It just has water on it, and I'm just gonna kind of like feather over the areas where I've painted the green down with using the marker. And as you can see, it already softened it up quite a bit.
Hey Vic, there's a question. Can they be used together with acrylic paint?
Yeah, so you could potentially use it with acrylic paint. However, that may damage your nib if you don't get all of the acrylic paint out of it. It's definitely not an acrylic marker, so you'd have to use it on a surface that's maybe not ideal for acrylic paint, if that makes sense. Just because they're water-based, I don't know how well it's going to work on canvas, but acrylic is a water-based medium. And I believe if you used enough water in conjunction with it, it would work just fine.
Great, thank you. And then another question, how long before it dries and makes it hard to blend, or are they easy to reactivate?
That's a great question as well. So these markers, you can let it sit for a little bit. In my experience, normally if you, like, we've let this one sit a little bit so we can test it on that. But the faster you kind of chase after the marker with water, the more seamless of a line you're going to get between your blends. Whereas if it's been sitting for a while and you kind of go back over it, you may just need to work a little bit harder into the paper with your brush to kind of blend that out. So you can see this one that's been sitting for a while, this one we did pretty much instantly.
That's great, thank you.
All right, guys. So after you have your first kind of mid-tone color in place, I'm going to go through with a darker version of that same color. And again, I'm just going to go ahead and look at my reference and start plugging it in. But as I do that, I want to show you guys this. So the paper is a little bit wet right now from me using my brush to kind of soften all those edges. So you can see how that's kind of like spidering out a little bit. That may happen if you're drawing with the markers on wet paper. If you want really precise lines, then I definitely recommend waiting in between colors drying, just so that you're able to get those clean edges if that's what you're going for. And these markers are really nice. We're going to do a whole bunch of layering in terms of that. So as you go, don't be afraid to really kind of like layer up these markers because they're so transparent. You're going to be able to see some of the colors underneath, just depending on what you're using. Cool. So here's my darker kind of mid-tones that I have in place. And again, I'm just going to take a little bit of a wet brush here and just blend some of them. In the reference photo, the marks on the bottom are kind of like a little bit sharper, and up top it's a little bit softer of a blend. And if you want to, you don't have to just blend with a brush. You can actually go back in with another color. I'll just use the first color that we used to kind of blend that area out a little bit, and that will help with your transition from the darker to the lighter color. And also, as you kind of work with paper, I mean, everybody's going to be probably using different papers, whatever you have. But as you draw, you may see that a couple like kind of little crumbs appear. That's just from the paper getting pulled up a little bit. Don't worry about that. That's not permanent. Basically, all that is just the top surface of the paper coming up a little. I like to wait till it's fully dry, and then you can just wipe them right off, and it won't really affect the texture of the paper underneath. Even with a paper like the Van Gogh paper that we're using right now, which is going to be more a student grade paper, you may get that a little bit more, but it still works great. It still holds the color really great. So. All right, awesome. So now that we have all of our midtones in place, I'm going to go ahead and start adding in some of the accent colors, which is going to be these two yellows. I'm going to start out with the lighter one. The reason why I am going to transition to this color is because we just used green. So I like to use a color next that I can blend into my initial color. So yellow blends into green really great. So that's the one I'm going to use next. In that case, if I need to blend these colors together, I can just use a wet brush, and they're going to blend together pretty seamlessly.
Do you know if you can replace the tips on the markers, or is it?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So these markers are pretty much disposable. You can't replace they don't have cartridges. You can't replace the nibs. But with that being said, they do last such a long time. I probably had these markers for like at least, I want to say 3 years. I use them a lot. I live in Tucson, Arizona. It's a pretty dry place out here. And they really do keep their life in them. If you do have one that dries out, you can actually kind of revive it just by sticking it into some water. I know it sounds weird, but they are a water-based tool. So that might be like a chance for it to come back to life. But yeah, they're going to be a little bit more competitive in price than something where you would need to eventually like replace the nib and that kind of stuff. It's going to be a little bit more cost effective than that. So. Okay, awesome. So I'm going through with my darker kind of accent tone, and this is just going to be this kind of yellow ochre. This is a really pretty color. It's awesome for portraits, but also found in nature a lot. So I really like using the yellow ochre. Okay. And again, I'm going to use my wet brush just to kind of blend everything up here a little bit more. And don't be afraid to use extra water. The markers, as you kind of build up, they're going to stay where you want them to be, if that makes sense. They're going to pretty much stay in place. It's just the more water and the more scrubbing you use is going to be what makes them blend together a little bit more.
How are they on light fastness?
Yeah, so because they're dye-based, they are not going to be light fast. That's also what gives them their vibrant quality. That's why a lot of people that use the Ecoline markers are people like fashion illustrators, people that do comics like myself, people that do like tattoo flash, things that are not going to be finished works, and things that can be potentially scanned and then digitally used. So if you are interested in these markers, but you are somebody that likes to do final work, just be aware that the colors are going to lose their vibrancy over time. So they're really nice for like journaling and projects where you're going to be scanning them. All right, awesome. So for my next step, I'm going to actually do my shadows next. I know some people with watercolor like to work dark or light to dark, but I'm actually going to go ahead and just go dark and then light. Basically, because when you're using markers in this way, and you're going to use a really dark color in comparison to the other colors you've been using, you want to be really kind of like deliberate and selective of where you put your darker colors, just because if you overblend your dark colors into your light, you can get a little bit of mud from it. You don't want your colors to get murky. Especially for this, we want our beetle to be like super rainbow. So I'm just using my black very selectively, and I'm just using that really small kind of brush tip to plug in a couple lines here and there. Drawing the little feet. And as you can see, you can put your dark colors right on top of the lighter. It has really great coverage. And I'm just going to kind of zoom through these little legs. But as I go, definitely notice that I'm not filling in the whole leg. I'm kind of outlining it. And that's going to be because I'm going to use two different darker colors after it and kind of chase this darker color that I just put in to add a lot of different variety into my beetle.
Hey Vic, we have another question.
Awesome.
Could you use the Ecoline ink bottles to revive the markers?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Can we use the Ecoline ink bottles to revive the markers?
Oh, yeah, that's an awesome question. I'm assuming you could, because these actually do line up with the markers in terms of numbers. I believe that should actually work probably better than water. I don't see why not. I have not personally done that before, but yeah, I could definitely see that working.
Yeah, that's great. And then another question, is there a spray you could use to keep the colors from fading?
Oh, so yeah, that's an awesome question too. If you got a spray and you want to try it out, definitely get one that has UVLS in it to protect from the sun's rays. And yeah, you can try it out. Just be sure that when you're spraying it, that you don't spray it too close. Just because, you know, it's water-based and you're applying it directly to the surface, you want to make sure that you're giving it plenty of space so it doesn't you know, mess up any of your color. But it's definitely worth a shot, especially if you make a piece that you're really happy with and you wanna display it. It's so pretty and colorful. So I know it's easy to want to try to save it. So yeah, I would use a UVLS. I believe Krylon and Golden make some nice ones. I've used both of those. So great questions. Thanks, guys. I love questions. All right, awesome. So as you can see, I'm just kind of continuing on with my black. Up top, I'm just using some water to kind of blend these shadows into the top part of the shell. But down here in the leg territory, I haven't really touched it yet. That's because I wanted to show you guys how I'm going to kind of jam as much color as I can into this little space. So I'm going to be using this blue and purple. next, but I'm going to start out with my purple because it's going to be a little bit closer to the black. So basically all you'll need to do is just take your color that you want to blend down and just kind of start feathering over the top one. And as you can see, we get a really kind of seamless blend between our black and purple. So you can see a little bit of where that purple stroke starts. That should dry up. You know, it's wet right now, and be pretty seamless with your black. If you want to make sure that you're hiding your strokes, if you don't want there to be any kind of like mark at all, you can just go over the entire darker shape with your lighter color. And like I said earlier, don't worry about the color transferring and destructing your tip, because it will work itself out. All right, and I'm just going to go through some of the areas that we've input with black and just start adding my violet right into it. I want to leave a little bit of white space showing because I still want to add a highlight even on the darkest areas. And I'm going to be doing that with the blue here. And as far as the shadows on the actual shell, I'm going to use that same technique that I've been using and kind of use the purple to blend out some of the areas of the black a little bit more. And this is just so that it doesn't look so like blocky and have so much contrast to it. I want it to blend together a little bit more.
Rick, so there actually is a second nib. Apparently, if you unscrew the top of the brush pen, there's a second nib within it.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Vic,
okay.
at the top where the brush pen is, not the other end where the color is, unscrew at the, no, the top. Yep.
Okay. What? Oh my
Flip it around.
gosh.
Oh,
there
wow.
it is.
There it is, guys. Wow. Christmas. Here it is. Wow. Okay. I see. So you can just kind of like pull it out of
And flip it around. Yep.
What? Okay. You heard it here. Thank you, Peter St. James.
Yeah, that is amazing. You would have
You
never
have
known.
to thank my
Yeah.
sister Marianne. She told me.
Oh,
Thank you. Thank you, Marianne. That's awesome. Wow. I had no idea. That is so cool. Okay. Well, the life just got even longer on my brush pens.
The more
Thanks
you
to you
know.
guys. Totally. That's awesome. Wow. I'm just blown away. I don't even know what to say about that. That's so cool. Okay. Very neat. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start adding in that lighter blue just to add a couple more highlights in the open spaces of the darker areas. This is also going to help transition this darker color back into my green, since blue, green, and purple all can be really seamless together. And that's an important thing to, you know, just depending on whatever you're painting, of course, it's going to be different. But you can change your reference photo to be whatever you want it to be. You don't have to paint it exactly like how your reference photo looks. You can kind of alter your illustration to work better for how you want to try, you know, painting it. So, okay, awesome. So hopefully you guys can see all of that color in just a little dark spaces on the legs. Okay, and there's not actually that much blue on the body. I'm just gonna add a little bit here and there. And then he has like these really cool little antennas. I don't know what these are called, bonus points. If you do, definitely let us know in the chat if you guys know what these little things are called. I don't think they're his eyes, but they might be. So go ahead and do that. Add just a little bit more shadow to them. And you can always work back in with the color if you forgot it. You have a whole bunch of control when you're working with markers. And that very fine tip allows me to kind of like just ever so slightly draw the line. This felt tip is not so soft that you can't feel the paper underneath. I like to feel the grain of the paper so I can know how thick or thin my line is going to be as I draw. So it has like a really nice kind of firmness to it. I'm just drawing my outline here. Cool. All right, our little beetle is starting to take shape. Okay, so the next color that I'm going to add into it is the accent color, which is kind of like a red and orange spot. And that's going to mainly be on the shell. So I'm going to start with this carmine color. It's going to be pretty opposite of what we have. And it's going to be more vibrant depending on where the color is lighter underneath. So we set this up to have a whole bunch of different tones underneath it. And depending on how hard you're pressing down on the brush pen is going to kind of dictate the width of the line that it creates. And then again, I'm just going in with a brush up top to kind of blend out that color. I do also want to mention that there is a colorless blender. So if you are painting on the go and you don't want to bring a whole bunch of brushes and watercolor and that kind of stuff, you can just bring your markers, and instead of using a wet brush, you can just go in with this colorless blender. It looks a little bit dirty, but basically it's just going to be a clear kind of blending tool. So this is really cool if you want a whole bunch of control over your marks. That blender will be able to do that for you. And of course, it's going to be just like that other yellow that I showed a little bit earlier, where it's going to just kind of bounce back to its regular nib. So these, again, are pretty resilient. Just wanted to point that out. Okay, awesome. So next I'm gonna go ahead and start adding a couple more colors into our shell, mainly purple and a little bit of orange. So I'm just gonna continue to kind of keep layering these colors up wherever I think that they need to be. And again, just take note of all the different kind of range of colors you can get. Even if you have only the 3 primary colors, you're able to get such a large variety out of it, just because you can just keep layering and creating your own colors that way. All right. Put some orange in here as well. I do also have my jars of Ecoline set aside if you guys want to see a couple techniques with those. When we finish up our little beetle here, I'm happy to show those off as well. And so as far as, making a really polished illustration with this, you can just kind of keep going back over areas that you've already created, already finished up, and just keep adding color to those to kind of finish off your piece. So you can get really in depth with them. I like to always go back in with my first initial color and just kind of re-plug in some of the areas that I see in my reference. This way I get a really I kind of like reestablish that initial color that I used, especially if I've used a lot of other colors, just to make sure that it's the most prominent. Got to make sure our beetle is super green. And when I demo these, I do get lots of questions about people asking if you have to put the cap right back on them right away. I just do it out of habit because I'm just used to using them at home. But you can leave the caps off for quite a while as you draw with them. I really don't think it's going to make them dry out any faster. And plus we learned that they have a secondary tip, which is just the coolest thing. I'm so excited about that. All right, guys, let me just plug a couple more details into here, and then we're going to move on to adding some highlights into our bug. Okay, awesome.
Have you used these markers to make landscape?
To do a landscape?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. A lot of people will actually use these for plein air just because they're so easy to pack up and take with you. Everything about them also is non-toxic because it's water-based. So lots of people, you know, have no problems taking them on planes or just throwing them in their bag. Also, you know, kids can use them. They're completely safe. So good question.
That's good to know. Thank you.
All right, guys. So I'm going to go ahead and start plugging in some highlights with my jelly roll. So I'm sure that most of you guys that grew up in the 90s are very familiar with jelly rolls. But basically, it's just going to add a little bit of a highlight onto our marker. You guys can see that. So you can actually do larger areas by just doing really tight little circles. I am going to get this area wet and kind of blend it out. This is going to be like my main highlight. So if you are drawing with the markers and you accidentally kind of like overdid an area, or you used marker on an area that you wanted white, you can just use a jelly roll, a white jelly roll, to kind of go back over that area. Now I'm using water to kind of blend the edges of it into the marker. So what that's going to do is it's going to soften up the edges, and I'll go back in with my jelly roll to kind of build up that main center arc of the fade. And then it's going to create like a really soft but bright highlight. So I'm going to just go ahead and plug a couple more in throughout. And, you know, if you have something like white acrylic ink, Amsterdam makes an amazing white acrylic ink. If you want to do larger areas with a brush, you can absolutely do that. Or if you have white gouache, white acrylic, anything like that should cover this marker really easily. But if you're doing really small details and you are doing an illustration, the jelly roll allows you to get into a lot of different areas. And they also make different nib sizes as well. So this one is a size 10, I believe. So it's going to be the thickest one that they have. And as you can see, I'm just kind of adding those little white lines throughout. And it really adds a lot of dimension as opposed to over here where it looks kind of flat. I'm just following the outside contour line. It's called rim lighting. And what's really cool about these jelly rolls is that if you just do one initial pass on top of the Ecoline, it kind of has like a white appearance to it. But if you do multiple lines into it, you just like kind of keep working over that same area, it will start to pick up the color that's underneath it, which is kind of a fun little tip. And I can show that off to the side if you guys are interested in seeing that a little bit more, a little bit bigger. Okay, cool. Almost done with these little legs. And if you want, you know, a really bright highlight, but you don't want it to be white, you can always go back over it with another color. I'll show you guys that in a moment here, but you can always go back over top with like a yellow Ecoline and just pick up over that white. So lots of different possibilities as far as layering goes with these markers and pen. All right, almost done with these little horns. And you don't have to, you know, like if you're going for the rim lighting look, you don't have to outline the complete thing. You can have a couple breaks here and there, just to make it look a little bit less outlined. Also, if you have any areas where maybe your marker bled over the line, you can use a jelly roll to fix that up quite a bit. Just kind of clean up that area with relative ease. Okay, so I want to show you guys how to build up that main kind of softer highlight that we have in place. And that's just going to be by pretty much building up the center. Just keep applying that jelly roll in layers. And then I'm going to use that wet brush again to just kind of blend it out. So you can do that as much as you need to make the highlight darker or brighter for whatever your needs may be. Okay. So as far as adding a little bit of color over top of some jelly roll, I have some that I added right here to cover up some of that red. I wanted to put a little bit more yellow into that spot. So now that the jelly roll has dried, I'm going to go in with the yellow and just plug it in right on top. So it doesn't cover it completely, but it covers it enough to make it look like it's yellow, which is actually really cool. Gives it a lot of different dimension to it. If you want it to cover more seamlessly, you probably have to do a couple layers of jelly roll and then do the Ecoline on top. And you don't have to cover over the whole thing either. You can cover over just part of it if you want to. It's all about like the push and pull of using the Ecoline on top of the jelly roll. You can get some really cool results out of it. All right. How are we doing on questions?
So far, it looks like we've got all of them answered, but I'm sure a couple will come up soon enough.
Okay, awesome. Well, I did want to show off the jars really quick as well. Basically, the jars are going to be that exact same kind of really bright formula, but in a jar form. Okay, let me just open that up real quick so you guys can get a look of what the pipette looks like. So this is actually glass, and it does go off a little bit to the side. It's not a perfectly flat pipette at the bottom. It has a little bit of a bend here, and you can just go ahead and use the pipette if you want, or you can just dip your brush directly into the jar. But this Ecoline fluid watercolor is really vibrant. I'm sure you guys can see that. It's like jumping off the page. So it's really fluid, easy to use. I've seen people do full paintings with these and they're absolutely gorgeous. But you can also use them with your markers as well. You can use them in like conjunction with each other because they are that same formula. They're very compatible. So let me just kind of move this around so you guys can check out those awesome colors. But, you know, I've seen people do kind of like calligraphy with the brush pens and the jars together. For example, let's go ahead and do some yellow and blue. So if you have your yellow brush pen, you can actually dip it into the jar, any different color you want. It is going to dye the tip a little bit. So the deeper you put it into your jar, the longer it will take before the color comes out. And I am no calligrapher, but you can make some pretty cool stuff out of it. You can get some really pretty kind of gradations. And then of course your pen is going to go back to normal, just depending on how long you dipped it into the jar for, will kind of be how long it takes for it to get back to its regular state. But you know, there's 60 different colors for the jars and 60 different options for the markers. So you got a whole bunch of different possibilities on mixing and matching the two together.
Vic, I think you can also dip the tip back into water to help get the blue out faster.
Oh, okay, awesome. Yeah. So let's try that too. So yeah. Very cool. Boom, back to normal. So yeah, like I said, the tips are very durable and they will revert. I know that it's tricky to believe it, but they'll go back to regular. So but yeah, these jars of Ecoline are going to act a lot like a standard watercolor. It's just going to be a lot more fluid. So any watercolor techniques that you're used to doing, these Ecolines will pretty much act the same. It'll just be a lot more fluid, as opposed to being in a dried pan or a tube. So yeah, a lot of fun to use separate and also together. And especially for something like this, if you wanted to initially do a background, you could use the Ecoline jars to cover a larger area, and then wait for that to dry, go in with the markers. Or you could get some pretty cool effects doing it on top as well of wet paper. So yeah. So that's pretty much all that I have planned for you guys today, unless if you wanted to see anything in particular. I have a whole bunch of different colors here, and I'm happy to show anything off if anybody would like to see.
We actually got a question from Mike. Do you ever wet the paper first prior to using the brushes?
Prior to using the brush marker pens, or
yeah,
okay.
I think that's what he meant.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me grab a new piece of paper here so we aren't painting on the same thing. But yeah, you can absolutely do that. That's no problem. So basically what it's going to do is it's going to be a little bit more fuzzy and kind of like less deliberate. Let's use. So this is going to be on the dry paper, and this is going to be on the wet paper. So as you can see, it kind of spiders out a little bit. It's definitely going to be a softer look, a little bit less contrast. But if you're working on something that you want to be really soft from the get-go, that you don't want to kind of blend an area out too much, then that might be perfect for you. If you're, I'd like imagine maybe painting some flower petals or something that's going to be a lot softer. This could be a really cool effect. And if you are going for something really soft and you have the wet and you're using kind of like that wet on wet technique, doing something with the Ecoline jars might work a little bit better for you if you're going for a very soft kind of built up look.
Yeah, that looks great. Okay, so I think we got through all of the chat questions. If anyone else has any more questions, feel free to chat, or you can even just raise your hand at this point and we can unmute you and then you can ask away as well. Are the liquids so the liquids and markers are sold, so they can be sold as sets or individually. Above Ground carries both individual and sets, and I can get you a link for that and put that in the chat right now.
Yeah, and if you're not so sure about how they're going to work for you, I highly recommend just getting the 3 primary colors, because you're able to do so much with even just 3 markers. Might want to do the 3 primary colors in the black. I know we make a a basics kind of like 5 set for the markers. You're able to just do so many different things, blend so many different colors with those. And a lot of people will use them even just for calligraphy or journaling, but also illustration is really fun too.
So the first link that I put in the chat is to the inks, and then I'll get you the markers. And right now Ed has raised his hand, so I'm just gonna unmute you. Go ahead, Ed. You can ask a question.
Hi, I just want to say thank you for doing the demo and that you're extraordinarily talented. Thank you for your time today.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Thank you so much. That's so kind. Thank you. So happy
Yeah,
to be here.
Definitely have
So.
to agree. It was really nice watching you do your thing.
Wonderful.
And also posted, so the first link that I posted in the chat is going to be the individual inks, which also you can find the sets there. And then the second link is the brush pens, which is individual pens, or you can look through and find a set that might fit better. And yes, we do deliver, or if you live by an above ground store, you can do free pickup. But we have paper and the pens and inks all available on the website. Okay, I think everyone's just admiring the beetle at this point.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear. That's awesome.
Yeah,
I wanted to
really.
choose something super colorful just to kind of like, just so you guys could see the layering and all the different color possibilities with these. So
Yeah, it's definitely a great showcase of the inks and the pens working together too, like how you can add, and then even using the jelly pens as a highlight was a great idea. I would never have thought of that.
yeah, definitely. And if you guys have metallic watercolors at home, like specifically Fine Tech is awesome. Also, you know, Rembrandt Specialties. You can actually layer metallic watercolor right on top of this as well, and it makes some really beautiful effects. So definitely don't forget you can layer art supplies you already have at home to make some really cool new things. So.
And then someone just asked about like an online portfolio. So I just linked to your Instagram. So I'm
awesome.
sure that has all of the rest of your portfolio links and everything as well. So her Instagram is linked in the chat as well for anyone that wanted to see some other art that she did. I know I looked through a bit before the demo and she has some great stuff up there for inspiration.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, that's awesome. I have an entire comic book series that I did with the Ecoline colors. So you guys will definitely have to check it out if you're interested in seeing some more. But yeah, thanks again so much for having me. It was a wonderful time. So thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you. And then we actually have a couple more questions.
Oh, great. No, that's awesome.
Someone asked if you could put the reference photo beside the piece that you just did.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so it's on my iPad, so I don't know how well the screen is going to pick it up.
Oh, yeah.
You might just see my ring light.
Oh, no, we can see both. We also see the ring light, but yeah, it definitely is a great depiction of that.
Yeah.
And then
So
another question is, have you ever used other of the gel pens for highlights or just the white to add over top? So I guess for the highlights and stuff.
Yeah, that's a great question because gel pen makes all sorts of different types. I'm sure you're familiar. Their moonlight ones are the ones that are going to be the most opaque, that kind of cover the most. But they have some really cool like iridescent ones and metallic ones that you could play around with, and those will absolutely layer just fine on top of the markers. So good question.
Yeah, that's great. I think we got through all of the questions for now. If anyone else has any questions about the links, if they suddenly disappear in the chat or you can't find them, you can go ahead and email me in the email that you got this link from. It's Ashley@AboveGround, and I can send over some links of the products that Vic used in the demo today. And I think on that note, we seem to be good for the demo. Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I hope you
Yeah.
guys all have a wonderful day.
Thank you for joining. Thanks everyone for joining as well, and hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. Bye guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.